this kind of giving, sacrificial giving. This does not teach how to give. We never hear Jesus saying, he says what she does, but he doesn't describe it as a really, he's more describing what she does rather than how he feels about it. And it never says how the widow felt about what she did. And so some would say what we're really missing is we need to back up just a little bit. Not that we can't take a beautiful message of giving about it, but if you'll notice where I started, it's actually, like in my Bible, the widow's offering, it starts with Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the treasury. But if we back up just a couple of verses, it starts as he's describing these teachers of the law. And he says, watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor and banquets. And then, does anyone remember what it says? They devour widows' houses. They devour widows' houses. So during that time, what would happen is when someone's husband died, these teachers of the law, of the church, they would sweep in and want to do the transaction and take care of the business and the assets, and they would charge a fee for this, and they're saying there's a lot of abuse happening when this happens. So, it doesn't make any sense that this would be just about giving. A widow comes into the story just after Jesus has said, they devour widows' houses. It doesn't make any sense that we would just stop right there and go to this story and talk about how she gave everything and how wonderful that was. Really what we're missing, this is just a point of view, is the thought that this is more about look how wonderful person she is, not that she couldn't have been, but look what you've done to her. You've bankrupted her. The religious institution of the day had bankrupted her. And now she doesn't have anything left. And we know this was kind of part of Jesus' teaching, that what he was bringing back was some of this corruption and trying to call attention to it. And I've been thinking about this idea of when what is an authority often, or when that happens, that takes advantage of those who are most vulnerable. And we know that it isn't just a story that happened long ago, but that it still happens at times. This week I saw a couple of documentaries. I like watching documentaries, and the first one was one called Homeland. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's about Native American reservations, and it picked out 5 Native American reservations that are struggling. And I think in my own mind, the idea of the Native American, like what happened to the Native Americans, seems like a long time ago that we kind of tragically misplaced them and brought all this tragedy about them, but I don't often think about where they're at now. And the point is that they're all struggling, all of these reservations. And the 5 they picked out were because of environmental practices. They have pristine land. They have land that has been untouched because of who they are. And these big energy companies and oil companies have come in and built up these huge structures right surrounding them. And after these terrible practices of dumping water that's too high in salt or whatever into their streams, and people are ill. These companies have offered much money, lots and lots of money. They think that they would take it, and they won't. And they're trying to fight it. Now, it's just kind of a humorous little bit. They showed this picture of these warriors on horses. They look like they're all dressed up in their war paint, and it had underneath the subtitle, Homeland Security, which a little different take on it, So I've been thinking about their plight. And then the other one I started to watch and haven't finished is called Crude. And it's about an oil company that started, it was Texaco, out by Chevron, I guess, but started drilling in the Amazon in the 60s or the 70s. And they just went for the cheapest way possible to drill, and they've left pits of oil and sludge everywhere, petroleum. They didn't care about how they cleaned up. If they dig down 6 or 7 feet, they just bring up this muck that's just filled with oil, and it's in the water, and kids are having cancer, and just these heartbreaking stories. And they've been in courts for 13 years already trying to get them to clean up and even acknowledge that they did it. And they're still in this process of trying to fight them. And it's like 32,000 Amazon people have signed on to this petition trying to find justice for their community. I think I was in seminary when I first heard the term environmental racism. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but about, that a lot of our environmental problems are often in areas where people they think are too poor or uneducated to fight what's the practices and what's happening. So it's something that continues to happen, and what we learned in our teachings, and is the scary part, is that all of these characters are part of our character. That we too can have a teacher of the law within us, and to be aware of that. So in this story, we have with us the beautiful idea of a way to offer total devotion. We have this sort of warning to us about the teacher of the law and having too much pride, rather. And then I'd like to finally just offer one more take on it, and just that's simply the Swedenborgian perspective that I read about. And this isn't to take away from the experience or the hardship of being widowed or without a partner, but the idea is, and something we touched on in Sunday school, the whole of our theology is, and the Bible is really about bringing the head and the heart together. That's a couple. That's the couple that we are working on. And we've separated one out if we have a widow. Something's gone. Now, we often talk about the love and the wisdom. We kind of have more control over one than the other. Which one would we say we have more control over, our thoughts or what we love? Our thoughts. I mean, we can't totally control it. Thoughts pop into our mind, but we can decide what we're going to do about that thought. And we can work on the way that we see the world in our perspective. But we're kind of missing the love side. Now, there's a positive in this, and that this is a good thing to remember, because it's actually God's love that powers us. And it isn't something that we have. We are all, this is speaking to a way of being, a kind of humility, that when we can acknowledge that we have but little ourselves in this world, that we need complete dependence on God, that we don't have everything that it takes, we can give our all. And that is the only way we can really give our all, is when we acknowledge that we need God. Otherwise, we give what seems like a lot, but it's not very much if we think we own it all, and it's our riches. So it's a beautiful way, another way of looking at it, I think, that can provide so much meaning. And may we be aware this week of the scribe within and the widow within, and hopefully honoring that widow part who represents that being able to give up that independence, even though that's something that we often want to cultivate in this country, but being able to give up that independence to have that freedom and dependence on God.